Before the guide begins, I will dispel the erroneous idea that Nightreign's lore is less significant than that of any other From Software title. Nightreign isn't, as many misinformed people claimed, non-canon. It simply takes place in an alternate timeline in relation to Elden Ring. The director of the game even said we should look forward to its narrative. As I will explain, the divergence begins to take place during the Shattering. The director elaborated upon this question, quote, Nightreign shares the base setting and the world of Elden Ring, but it's played out on a different stage, so to speak. There's this concept called the Nightlord, which is a sort of abstract phenomenon, or calamity, that has befallen the lands between in this alternate timeline. It needs something to oppose it, and that opposition comes in the form of the Nightfarers, who are these warriors who are entrusted with the fate of opposing and defeating the Nightlord and putting a stop to this terrible calamity. End quote. Quote, after the events of the Shattering, this is a completely separate branch of the Elden Ring story. End quote. From Software fans will find in Nightreign a perfectly cohesive, yet hidden story, as is always the case with their games, and I will bring it to light. As a final disclaimer, I will briefly address the original Elden Ring's lore when relevant. I have made a comprehensive 90-minute long video about it, so I recommend you all watch it when you have the time. This video will not be a bland summary of what is plainly revealed, with vague, pseudo-explanations for what is concealed. I will explain in a concise manner the story of Nightreign, clearing it up so you'll truly understand it. So without further ado, I present to you the complete lore guide to Nightreign. Marika was the god emperor of the lands between. She had, in the past, plotted against the Greater Will by instructing one of her Empyrean progenies, Melina, to conduct the Night of the Black Knives, and that event resulted in the mother of Fingers, Metyr, being injured and made infertile. About 100 years later, her grand conspiracy reached its climax. Marika shatters the Elden Ring, with the intent of driving away the Greater Will for good, and starting a succession crisis among her demigod offspring that would ultimately lead to their extermination. Also that the world would be freed from the control of the Demiurge, the supreme, cosmic being responsible for her and her lineage's divine essence, whose mind is the Greater Will. As a brief aside, this conspiracy directly parallels a major plot of the book series A Song of Ice and Fire, which is George R.R. Martin's, the man who wrote the mythos of Elden Ring, as confirmed in an interview, magnum opus. A god emperor, the Azor Ahai, the envoy of the Demiurge, an archetypal antichrist, produced a lineage of special humans who went on to conquer the world. Even his distant descendants, who possess only a fraction of his blood, were strong enough to conquer an entire continent. In response, a group of Andals organized themselves to, over the centuries, engineer wars and other sorts of situations such as the passing of laws to slowly dilute and eradicate the powerful bloodline, with the aim of cleansing the world of the Demiurge's influence. Marika's conspiracy also shares plenty of similarities with plotlines from other works by George, and the presence of a Demiurge and archetypal Antichrist are also shared by many of them, as I discussed in my first Elden Ring video. Dark Souls, a game series written and directed by Miyazaki, has Velka, who is exceedingly similar to Marika in character and modus operandi. A conspiracy orchestrated by her is the backbone of the story of Dark Souls. In Nightrein's timeline, a specific event triggered a world-ending calamity. A certain Witch of the Woods, who was versed in warfare and had, in the past, tragically ended a conflict with an ingenious contraption made with dark magic that wiped out an entire people, managed to summon an outer god of night through a ritual involving a moonstone. The entity would, she thought, be powerful enough to end the war. The Recluse, an ox, whose invading phantom conjures Night Shard and founding Rain of Stars, wanted to create their lords to rule the world in the night. However, the outer god, who was born into the lands between to be no more than a weapon of mass destruction, ran wild. Its influence contaminated the battlefield, and induced a blood-drunken state upon the minds of the living, ramping up their negative emotions and desire for indiscriminate death. The embodied outer god was, at first, the size of a baby. It was a baby with a heart of moonstone. But it grew to the size of a titan as it fed on life, not unlike the Erdtree itself. And it attains the shape of a giant made of damp, solid dark wood, the antithesis of the Erdtree, a spirit tree of light. The witch fulfilled her desire, but at an unreasonable cost, the death of the world. Those of you who have played Bloodborne and Sekiro should be familiar with this concept, as both of those games feature it as a beastly frenzy, which was also caused by the influence of an outer god, hence the Shura. Outer gods are akin to forces of nature. They personify a specific element, hence the ideas that are associated with it. For instance, the Formless Mother, the outer god of blood, craves wounds. A central aspect of the outer god of night is that of death, thus it's natural that it seeks to spread it. The outer gods arose out of the Big Bang-like implosion that birthed the universe. The One Great, the Abraxas-like, all-encompassing god, split itself to create the cosmos, and each element of nature is a fragment of him. The outer god of night is opposite to the outer god of day, which is the one that Marika was a vessel for. Marika ruled over the Golden Day. Her hero was one of life without death, as she removes the rune of death from the Elden Ring itself, granting man immortality. So, the night is the antithesis of the age of life. It is an age of death, where life is preyed upon, and whose endpoint is the complete desertification of the world, as all is burned by the flames of the night. And this distant future is the place where we, the player, travel to in the third night of an expedition. We travel through time to a sea of ash bereft of life. Again, this too mirrors a plot development of the Dark Souls series. In a climactic sequence, the player travels to the distant, ruined future, the place called Londor, to fight against a being who conquers the wasteland, standing as its sole surviving inhabitant. In order to combat the night, Marika's Round Table Hold, the place where her order of crucible knights, led by her first husband Godfrey, had sworn to safeguard the Erdtree, was reformed to host a group of souls who would become martyrs to a greater cause, the Nightfarers. They would hunt the Nightlords, beings who manage to conquer the night, and who exist in the post-night world. They are the only creatures that manage to resist the night by incessantly consuming souls themselves, like the calamitous phenomenon they were resisting against, and who saw its end, as it sucked all life but theirs from the planet. By hunting the Night Lords in the far future, the night is weakened, and the aspect of night, the manifestation of the outer god, is called upon. And once the aspect of night is felled, the night will finally end its reign of torment. The Nightfarers are guided by the will of Marika herself, by her grace, so that the day is restored, and her grand conspiracy can continue. In a way, Nightreign is a prequel to Elden Ring, as I will explain in detail later in this video. Now that I have explained what the Nightlord are, I will talk about each of them in listing order. Upon a rain-swept night in Liurnia, a three-headed wolf, an anomaly that was feared and exiled from its pack by its kin, seized the sword of a prince of Caria with its great jaws. But the prince showed no fear, and instead of fighting back, he took the beast in his arms and formed a bond with it that would last until the end of time. His master, the Carian prince, died in the shattering, and was reborn as the final form of the aspect of night. Even so, the beast remained loyal. The Tricephalos, its name literally meaning three-headed, stood as the figure that gatekeeps the underworld, like a Cerberus. It became the first Night Lord which the Nightfarers must defeat to progress in their path. It fought and won against a world-ending calamity and guarded the path beyond, fencing off invaders, even at the cost of its life. Also it could protect its master, who, at this point, had lost his memory and sentience, and was reduced to a mere vessel of darkness. Adel was a dragon from the cursed lineage of Baal, that is, a wyvern, a particularly gluttonous one. He ate so much as to become bloated and disfigured, with additional rows of uneven teeth growing in its gaping jaw. His skin became a blackish purple, the color denoting a dark, impure mixture of many things. His binge eating also intoxicated him, and he occasionally vomits a green, putrid substance as a result, and is incidentally weak to poison, as his stomach and general organism were stressed to the point of nearing collapse. However, his excesses proved useful for his survival, and he conquers the night. He parallels the Gaping Dragon, the Dark Souls boss featured in Nightreign, who inhabits the underworld of Lordran and ate indiscriminately, not avoiding even the man afflicted with the Blightpus condition, to the point of complete disfigurement and intoxication. In Nightreign, there are many callbacks to older designs, some of which may help us decipher the lore through association. for design patterns often have a deeper meaning and indicate a logical foundation. Gnoster is not an individual, but two beings conjoined into one, who managed to conquer nature, Erebis. They perfectly complement each other, and their wholesome union was a survival mechanism which enables them to survive the night. The secluded forest, the natural habitat of the moth and scorpion, was being eaten away by the powerful rain and blue fire, turning into a lifeless desert of ash, and a mass exodus of its inhabitants took place, their destination being the center of the world, the lands between, the last place to be consumed by the night. The moths are uniquely intelligent creatures that were able to mind control hives of lesser flying insects. They weaponize the dark pests so that they bite away the souls of the living and feed what they absorbed to it, the moth hiding away, invisible, nigh undetectable. But their intellect alone was not enough to fend off against the sharpest and strongest predators, and all of them, but one, went extinct along with all but a handful of beings. The scorpions are uniquely strong and resilient creatures, and an exceptional individual, referred to as Shears, could momentarily forfeit his very life, turning his body into impenetrable rock, which rendered it immune to the effects of the perilous rain and the fire of night. That ability was paired off with abundant strength, and Shears was able to fend off for himself even in the direst of times, though even then it was not wholly capable of surviving the night on his own. Thus, the wisest of all moths, one so intelligent it learned magic, and the strongest of the scorpions, wisely attached to each other, one providing that which the other lacked. Hence together, their skill set ensures their survival. Maris, a being whose name means Star of the Sea, was an ancient alien who lived in the deep for eons. As its name implies, it had been born out of a falling star that landed on the abyssal seafloor, and it scarcely met with light throughout its nigh unending existence, as it was satisfied with aimlessly drifting away in the water, while camouflaged within its surroundings, and blended with the life around it as if in a dream. That was how it fed itself, like a blob, a bubble that gently consumed what it could assimilate within it, as amoebas and similar primitive life forms would. When the night conquers the surface world, the ancient being who embodies the deep sea finally had its interest piqued, for the world above was like the world below it knew, like a dream realm, a vast, vast empty stretch of space where it could float in loneliness, as it made the sky its own ocean. And since it was hardly alive itself, it wasn't threatened by the life-ending catastrophe. Chaos is born out of the desire of the One Grace to restore itself, to go back to the era of primordial chaos, the state of wholeness of the all, and it seeks to do that by melting all existence with its flames, which are composed of an even mixture of all elements, which is why it is plasmatic, often seeming like a liquefied type of flame, and why it is yellow and harbors a darkness at its core. Libra is, as the game puts it, a demon, an envoy of chaos, like the serpent's deity Agley, and the twin bird are to their respective forces, that is, to their respective outer gods. Nightreign ingeniously equates chaos to fool's gold, a mineral fools may perceive as gold, but is actually pyrite, which is composed of iron and brimstone, and is used to produce sulfuric acid. To desire chaos is to worship the most destructive aspect of the demiurge. It's a fool's enlightenment, hence the opposite to Marika's gold, which bases itself on distilling the better qualities of the whole. This serves as a metaphor for the divide between the Old and New Testaments of the Bible in Gnostic interpretation. The Old Testament is about the worship of the demiurge, a jealous, vengeful, wrathful god who mixes good with evil and destroys entire cities with brimstone. And the New Testament is about Christ, the envoy of the true God, the embodiment of true gold, who comes to the worlds to preach distillation of good from evil. In the context of Elden Ring, the Demiurge is the fractured one great, whose mind, the greater will, coordinates the colonization of planets so that the divine spark, the soul, of the creatures that inhabits them is extracted by antenna-like divine trees, which the entity sends through falling stars. Christ is Marika, who was, at first, an archetypal antichrist who desired for eternal life and to create an earthly paradise, but who later repented through martyrdom and brought forth, through a series of conspiracies, an era where man would rule over the world, free from the influence of the Demiurge. Marika's initial conduct perfectly mirrors her origin. The Hornsent had made her a god through a ritual of mass death. The energy, the souls of the sacrificed, serving to fuel her body, which became supremely conductive, an Empyrean vessel, that is, a conductor that is able to support the essence of an outer god, which, in Marika's case, was that of light, of gold, of day. As the embodiment of the Erdtree, Marika waged wars in the name of her rule, and the casualties served to nurture the tree, which, in turn, gave power back to her troops, blessing them with the raw energy of nature. And of course, a portion of all that energy feeds the Demiurge. The Erdtree behaves precisely like the sun as perceived by Gnostics, Kabbalists, and pagans. A cosmic body which takes energy and gives back so it can take more. Libra is referred to as a demon merchant, and he is a creature obsessed with balance, not with good and fair order and conduct, but chaotic balance. He acts like a demiurgic being, like the devil himself, the salesman you never wants to deal with, offering blessings that come with curses, and curses that can be turned into blessings. His design reflects his character. He looks like Baphomet, a black goat demon with an excess of eyes which represents the false enlightenment of fool's gold. The night would grant death to each and every being, indiscriminately. It would mean the end of the world. And Libra found this notion to be aligned with his ideals of absolute equilibrium. Fulghor was a renowned warrior who, during the early days of the Erdtree, that is, when it was but a grafted sapling, had received its blessing of raw, natural energy. His body was deformed by that holy communion. He became a centaur, a chimeric hybrid of man and animal. Like the other Crucible Knights, Fulghor had been, in the distant past, a member of the tribe of Horaloo, a barbarian warrior of the Highlands, and when his chieftain became Godfrey, the civilized godlike husband of Marika and first Elden Lord, he too assimilated into the emerging empire, and became a servant of the gods, that is, a servant of Marika, of her order, and later, of her dynasty, the Golden Lineage. He swore allegiance to the Erdtree in the Round Table Hold. The legend that the radiant gods could hide themselves within the roar of thunder is a vivid glorification of their pure bloodline, the Golden Lineage, for thunder itself is the manifestation of golden energy. As he was fighting in the Shattering, the envoy of the night, the manifestation of the outer god, began his disruption. His comrades in arms, who were devout servants of the gods like him, were possessed by the night and betrayed him in a frenzy, severing his left arm from behind. And as he looked back, he saw them in that bloodlusted state and despaired. As the war raged, he himself would become corrupt, and he would struggle for eternity, unable to tell friend from foe, guided only by his warrior's will to endure and fight on, like a berserker. He would devour all life indiscriminately, and as he consumed the living, he would grow to the point of becoming like a giant, his body partially bloated, like Udex Gundyr, the warrior champion, whose armor looks very similar to Fulghor's, who became a man-eater and was consumed by the abyss, his body swelling in the process. In fact, the Knight shares many similarities with the abyss of Dark Souls. Both are extreme manifestations of the night and of the dark, which seek to consume all life, though the reason behind their existence is entirely separate. The empty left arm exposes Fulghor's corruption, as the damp, dark abyss blurts out from the wound, and turns into a tentacle-like appendage with a hand at its end, a design which mirrors the left arm of Manus, the father of the abyss from Dark Souls. It represents the left-handed path. However, despite his corruption, The holiness of his weapon remains as strong as his fighting spirit. In prehistoric times, the dragons were the apex species of the world, and reigned over the lands between as tyrants. The north and the west were the territory of the ice dragons, and the south and the east of the fire dragons. The dragons ruled for thousands of years, but eventually mankind, a species that was confined in the underworld, for the surface as the domain of the dragons, would emancipate themselves and gradually take over their territory. This plot is identical to the origin of man's empire in the Dark Souls series. The tribe of Zamor would be the first to challenge the ice dragons for control of the region. They wielded a primitive form of ice magic and were proficient swordsmen, but would be conquered and enslaved by the dragons. A tribe of Numen would migrate to Mount Gomir, and there, commune with the serpent's deity Iglay. Through their communion, they attained control over magma, and developed metallurgy, giving rise to a Bronze Age. They would forge advanced tools and weapons, and learn to cast spells. In return for the blessings they received, the tribesmen would voluntarily infect themselves with an intestinal worm, which was the offspring of the deity, and then they would eat human flesh to feed it, offering their own kind as sacrifices to the serpent, which incidentally caused them to grow bigger and bigger. Now giants, the tribesmen felt they were powerful enough to fend off the ice dragons from their territory. They wished to conquer the mountaintops, so they could live closer to the cosmos and better commune with the celestial embodiment of their outer god, the Polar Star. The giants waged an endless war against the ice dragons that would only be won when the astrologers, a civilization of dexterous swordsmen, made an alliance with their fellow men. The humans won the war and drove their enemies to complete extinction. Their corpses were later merged with those of felled giants for the creation of the Dragon King soldiers, who were intended to serve as supreme warriors. There was one sole survivor, however, the ruler of the ice dragons, who had secluded herself in the icy fog of a phantasmal peak for ages, Caligo, the dragon whose great, shadowy pair of eyes, framed in frigid mist, are said to appear in history's great junctures, that is, in the great tales of early human history, and in the First Dragon War. As the last member of her species, she remained in seclusion, ever lurking, committing to memory what she perceived. Then, her observant eyes were drawn to the night, and she leapt into it with wings unfurled out of curiosity. And she proceeded to survive the calamity, becoming a Nightlord, and stationing herself at the world's end, having, ironically, outlived both her own kin and humanity. During the Shattering, Radagon, the hero, the champion of the Golden Order, stood as the ultimate protector of the Elden Ring. Many dared to challenge him. Among them, a certain Carrion prince, who proved no match and fell, just another body in a great pile, but eventually he awoke, crawling out from underneath the others. Though he had failed to protect anything or anyone, he yet lived, and so he cursed the world. The wrathful night had possessed him in death. It was the dead of night, and from the sky poured a great rain, for the outer god had established his reign. It's emblematic that the night would choose a Carrion prince as its host. After all, Caria is a nightly civilization of moon worshippers, whose main territory, Liurnia, is a lake ever charged by endless rain. Heolstor, as the aspect of night is called, a name which means darkness, is no more than a conductive husk of a body which hosts the rune of night. He parallels Radagon, the hero who fells the prince, both being vessels for an outer god, and having a pet wolf. An Empyrean is simply a being whose body is supremely conductive, and thus, prone to conducting an outer god, which is a force of nature. which is why each Empyrean is, in a way, cursed. They are plagued and blessed by the respective force of nature. Heolstor acquired an Empyrean-like body through what was essentially a ritual fueled by mass death, like the one which rebirthed Marika as a goddess. That ritual involved a pile of the conductive remains of the shamans, who were Marika's people, and Heolstor's birth involved a pile of the conductive bodies of the golden lineage, Marika's descendants, paired with the cold-blooded Nox. The abundant energy that seeped from the pile of dead accumulated in one entity, which became Heolstor as the lunar outer god of night, which had been birthed into the lands between in a more abstract form by the recluse witch, found a more fitting host. As it embodies the destructive aspects of the night, the silver mummy desired only to bring death and ruin to the world. Despite being described so much generically as a knight in the English translation, the Carian who became Heolstor was a prince of Caria who desires to inherit the Elden Ring and rule the lands between, for he brandished the Moonlight Greatsword, and it was tradition that the princess of Caria would gift her husband such a sword, and he wore a crown on his head. Like the recluse witch, the prince had his wish of ruling over the world in an age of night, which would stand in contrast to Marika's age of day, granted, though, with an unexpected cataclysmic consequence attached to it. Walking through the areas consumed by the night are normal shadow beings, and in the ending of Nightreign, we see their source, a titan made of dark wood who rises from the bottom of the sea. The Nightwalkers are akin to Gnostic archons, dark, non-creatures who feed off the energy of the living. Interestingly, the swirly patterns present on the Darkwood's surface are consistent with depictions of the Dark in Elden Ring, as seen, more notably, in the Sword of Darkness from the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. They are also found in the inventory graphic of Nightreign. In Dark Souls, wood is an element adjacent to darkness and water, and Elden Ring shares its alchemical structure, which exhibits an Aristotelian-like system for the nature of its world. Like the Erdtree, the Darkwood tree, that is the first vessel of the outer god of night, nurtures itself from the bodies of the deceased. As previously explained, its core was birthed by the recluse witch in a dark ritual. It was, initially, the size of a regular baby, though one with a heart made of moonstone, which was described as possessing a distinct lifelessness, as the night and dark embody death, in contrast to their opposites, light and day, which embody life. As the shattering raged on, it was nurtured by the energy of the dead, like the Erdtree itself, and became a titan of night. As the dawn is called upon by the Nightfarers, the timeline is disrupted once again. The outer god of night's vessel, the Darkwood giant, was about to rise and destroy the world, but at the end of its slumber, it is touched by a golden leaf of the Erdtree, and he walks away from the lands between, opting to leave it be. Thus, its night never reigns, and Nightreign's timeline martyrs itself away, ceasing to exist, but allowing the future to prosper. Just like the Nightfarers, for as is above, so is below. In Nightreign's main ending, the world is restored, and we see the gleaming dawn take over the sky. The main character of the game, a warrior named Wylder, is perfectly representative of this conclusion. He is the archetypal Christ, who can become Antichrist if he falls to temptation. Wylder's design represents the falcon, a bird which symbolizes the dawn, which he will bring through martyrdom, like Christ. However, should he be unable to detach himself from the earthly realm, should he prioritize the life of his sister over the entire world, he becomes a dark martyr, inheriting the role of Nightlord, so that the Round Table is reformed, and his sister is spared from death. The very archetype of the Nightfarer is that of the martyr, of the warrior who is sanctified through suffering and martyrdom. As the night is felled, the golden souls of the brave men and women who sacrificed themselves to end it rise together with the coming of day. As explained before, there is a great deal of time travel in Nightreign. The opening of the game implies, subtly, that time itself became distorted when night came during the shattering, and that the Nightlord is wiping away the past, the very history, of the lands between as it molds the future. And every quest line of Nightreign is done by traveling to a character's past through a chain of remembrances that end up influencing the future. The opening also states that the Nightfarers do not share an era, they hail from different times, bounded by the will to end the night, And as they defeat the Nightlord, they reach a timeless, colorless zone, where they can restore the timeline. This is, of course, very similar to the plot of Dark Souls, where most characters come from different times to a converging present. Nightreign's story is the perfect follow-up to Elden Ring's. Before Marika's Age of Gold, there was an empire which conjoined the opposites and ruled over the Eclipse, whose Elden Lord was Placidus X. Then, Marika's Age of Gold came as the distillment of one of the poles, that being the day, the light. The Nightreign is the other half of the equation, the distilled night and dark. Ranni's Age of Stars is the positive distilled night, in contrast to this unplanned, cataclysmic Age of Dark. The conspiracy of the Nox would only be fully realized by Ranni, Marika's bastard Empyrean daughter, who was also following her mother's will to bring forth a time where men are sovereign.
Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond.
Ironeye's alternative ending is quite similar to Wylder's, as is the quest line of the Duchess. The three characters are faced with the decision of either becoming martyrs for the coming of the dawn, for a greater cause, or abandoning their duties, choosing instead to preserve the night. In the case of Wylder, he may choose to become the Nightlord to save his sister. In the case of the Duchess, she desires to preserve her brother's life, and considered abdicating her duty. And in the case of the Ironeye, he may choose to preserve his own. His organization is one composed by those who live in death, by men who are reanimated to, specifically, conduct black operations, such as quests of assassination, and as they were done, they were quickly discarded. Isolde, who is named after a character of Arthurian legend who experiences an illicit romance, betraying her husband for her lover. Ironeye's superior felt a great deal of pity, and wished to emancipate her underlings of their plight, plotting against the Round Table so that they'd be freed and allowed to live on in death as the world collapsed. Her love made her betray her duty. She parallels the Isolde from Arthurian legend she is named after. Revenant's questline shows us how the Knight's frenzy worked in practice, as even family members brutally attacked each other in a maddened state. The reason for the Dark Souls cameos has to do with the nature of the night as a dream realm. It distorts both time and space, and pulls ideas, that is, souls, memories, from different dimensions, such as that of the Dark Souls series. The recluse realizes her main mistake, which was to neglect her newborn. She perceived it as no more than a tool for war and destruction, as no more than a weapon. As she embraced the crying baby in the timeless realm, the Outer God's shackled manifestation was pacified. And this is the end of this video. I sincerely thank you for watching. I plan to remake the Elden Ring video with a superior script and improved audio. And that future upload will be bundled with a revised and expanded version of this video as a bonus. My following upload will likely be the next episode of the Dark Souls lore series. And for those of you who are interested in my critiques of remakes, don't worry, as more will come eventually.